Welcome to the AP Cast with Alex and Phil. Let's get it. Welcome back, everybody, to the AP Cast. We gave you some heat, but the episode 4.5 what was it, Friday, after the news about AP broke, and so now we're running it back, and giving you episode 5. Tommy T and Coach AP together at last. Alex, big undertaking, big deal. Tom Telesco's the general manager. Champ Kelly is still the assistant general manager. There's been all types of consternation as to what happens. Some people have pointed the finger at me and said, "But you said, Phil," and you know what? I did. But some of the reasoning that I've heard behind that, why that went down, is basically Champ Kelly disqualified himself from the position.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I would also go as far as saying this goes back to what Mark Davis said from the very, very beginning, the very start of this all, when he said that he was saying that, when he first came into power with the Raiders, so to speak, and what he did was he hired a first year GM and he hired a first year head coach, and it didn't really work out. And I remember him saying that a few months ago now, that he knows that is where he messed up and he doesn't really want to repeat that again. And it seemed like he was ready to give it another chance, but ultimately he wasn't. He never got over that, it seems.
I don't know so much of it. It was that he never got over it, because he did another interview. He did one with another one you're talking about with Tayshaun earlier. And he did another one where he said, well, that wasn't what he wanted to do. It didn't mean that he wouldn't do it. But Tom Telesco is the general manager candidate that we needed, that we didn't know that we needed. He spent 11 years in the AFC West. Said in those 11 years, said he's built up his offensive line twice. Said he's kept the Chargers with probably one of the most stacked rosters in the entire league. For years, the Chargers have been the single-handedly most underperforming team with talent for talent in the entire league. And that's not his fault, because he wasn't coaching. He brought all the guys together, and between the medical staff and the coaching staff, somehow it just never worked out.
Yeah, for almost my entire lifetime of following football, being a fan of football, the Chargers have, as you said, just underachieved year after year, and I've never really seen a team do less with the most. And the Chargers is always, and especially in the last decade, like they've just had so much talent. And that's what you do as a GM. You bring in the talent. You can't bake the cake, right? The coach bakes the cake, and you, as the GM, your job is to gather the ingredients so that way the coach can bake the cake. And he's gathered the finest ingredients that you can really gather. And even last year, he's very consistent with it.
No, for sure. And there's a rhyme and reason and a method to the madness. You could call it BPA, but when your BPA is as solid as the ones that he's taken, you look like a genius. Because let's be honest, how many times have the Raiders fucked up their first round draft pick? How many times have they fucked up their first and their second round draft pick? They usually don't start hitting till about the third round, till the mid round.
Yeah, which is all fine and well, but when you need somebody, especially this year, especially when you need a quarterback, you want to hit that first round, second round, not even second round. You don't even want to wait. In fact, you probably want to trade up from where you are right now. So yeah.
And this is a unique situation. We will be speaking about it throughout the entirety of this offseason, all the way up until the time they actually start playing meaningful games, training camp preseason included. The Raiders. So heading into free agency now, I would say that the Raiders don't need a lot, but heading into free agency, Jermaine Illuminor is a free agent. Andre James is also a free agent. While initially I would have suggested that you can get better at those two positions in free agency. Tackle market in free agency is incredibly thin. Uh, you're looking at Trent Brown and Teron Smith are the two best tackles available currently at this point, and Jermaine Illuminor it would be the third. And that's frightening to me. But I know that the Raiders' tackle situation is an interesting one. They have Brandon Parker, who they have to do something with, who shouldn't cost them very much, or they should be able to retain him because he got injured once again. And I'd have to remember how that works in terms of service. You have Thayer Munford, who you drafted, who's given you solid contributions. I'd like to call it more in spurts than full games, but you know, with a different scheme, with a different set of assignments, and that they ask from him, if they can work back to his strengths, and then he could potentially be a guy that could step in and fill in. There wasn't a huge difference between him and Illuminor at right tackle. And for a game, he looked like he could have been the answer at left tackle until we saw Colt Miller back in with one shoulder. Now, the reason why I'm bringing up Colt Miller and talking about the tackle situation is because I got a proposition for you and all of you listening. So, if the Raiders were to give up 3 first-round draft picks, that's the first every year for the next 3 years, a second in this year's draft pick, and Colton Miller, would you take that? Would you do that trade if you were getting the number 1 overall draft pick and potentially a third or a fourth in return?
Yeah, so that's a great question. First of all, let me start by saying there's many different things that you could do for a quarterback. You know, you could wait until, what do the Raiders have, the 12th, 13th pick? Maybe the 13th? Yeah. You could wait until then. You know, you could, if you really want and you think the quarterback class is very stacked, you can go into the second round. You could trade up, not quite to first, but to a different one. You can sign a free agent. You can trade for somebody. A lot of things you can do, and a lot are more cost efficient in terms of both. Well, not in terms of contract, but in terms of giving up assets. But that's neither here nor there. Let's stick to the question at hand and pretend all those other options don't exist, and let's just pretend this is you do this or you don't do that. You just stick with what you have. So to answer your question with all that out of the way, I would. Oh, it's so tough, man. It's such a tough question because you go back to what you just said about the tackles. The Raiders' tackles aren't exactly cream of the crop as is, and there's not really many replacements out there. And Colton Miller he's Colton Miller. But at the end of the day, it's the quarterback position is so important to a team. It is so important, and I feel if the two choices, you only have 2 choices to trade up to the first overall pick or stick with what you have. I think you have to do it. I really think you have to do it. I think it's that impactful to a team. I think the Raiders did not do bad last year with what they had in place, right? With Aiden O'Connell and all that. 8-9, solid. But I believe that's their ceiling with Aiden O'Connell. I genuinely believe that is their ceiling. That is best case scenario with what they have. Because the defense was playing. The defense played better than I've ever seen in my entire life, and that's what they got. And Aiden O'Connell showed flashes of being really good. But that's the ceiling. That's the best case scenario with Aiden O'Connell. And I think you bring in a Caleb Williams. I don't think Caleb Williams is a perfect prospect by any stretch of the imagination, but you'd be foolish to look at Caleb Williams and what he could potentially do based on his raw talent and say that the best case scenario is the Raiders can only go 8-9, because that's just absolutely ridiculous. And for that reason, you have to do it.
That is that we've talked about this for a while, and now that I pose that to you and you've answered it, and I've thought about this as we've kicked it over and gone through it, you got to do it. You got to do it if that's what it's going to take, and it's only going to cost you. Because if you think about it, you've gotten the first overall pick. Yeah, it cost you your left tackle, but you got 17.5 million coming off the books. That's now the Bears' problem. You also have a difference in coaching philosophy, coaching scheme, coaching style coming up. You don't know, so you can absorb that hit. You can find a way to absorb that hit a little easier. While it may cost you, you can get rid of him, but you could conceivably go and find another guy and trade the fourth. You get back the fourth or fifth for another starter. Now, could he be? Does he have to be as good as Colt Miller? You'd like him to be, but if you got somebody serviceable, somebody who can start, somebody who is solid, that's pretty much what you need. Because now, as you talk about Aiden O'Connell, and there's so many different possibilities with what you could do with him. He was interviewed today by Logan Reaver, channel News at 8, or 8 News now, excuse me. That's what it is. Their sports reporter, friend of this program, Unfiltered Truth, Logan Reaver. Shout out. What's up, brother? How you doing? And you also have Mick Akers, who we've also interviewed as well. Mick Akers is a cool dude, but they caught him at pretty much the same time and got it out and started asking him questions. Aiden O'Connell knows the score, rep. You could see it in his face. He knew what it was. Said that heading into this offseason, they're bringing in somebody to try to replace him, and it's his job to keep his job to go out there and compete. And you know what? It's been a fucking long time since we've had some competition at quarterback. And if Aiden O'Connell wins the competition, you should have brought in a better quarterback. And if you bring in a better quarterback that completely blows them away, and you have a legitimate backup quarterback, and they're also going to look to add a veteran as well. Stay the fuck away from Russell Wilson. He's not the guy for this team. He's a culture vampire and a me guy. It's okay. He can have all the talent in the world. You don't need any more me guys at quarterback. So that should be that ship is sailed. It's not gonna win you nothing.
And not for nothing with Aiden O'Connell's answer to the question when he was asked about it. It was a fantastic answer from Aiden O'Connell. He basically said, hey, listen, it's my job to just compete, go out there and do what I got to do. And, it's the coaching staff's job to assess who gets QB1. All I can do is go out there and just ball. And, I'm just here for the team. Great answer from the kid, and you love to see it. You love that attitude, just team first mentality. And, yeah, man,
So let me pick that up for you where you stumbled a minute, and I got you. It's all good, brother. Just sit back. So the thing about that particular response is a couple things. You go back and you look at the Aiden O'Connell story and how many times this has been his reality. You're talking about a guy who coaches have tried to replace, probably going damn near since he got out of high school, and probably even dipping into some high school. He's no stranger. He's no stranger to what's going on. He got an opportunity to go out there and fulfill his dream and show that he is capable and he can play in this league. Can he get better off of what he did last year? Yes. Depending on the scheme, you can probably do some more things to take better advantage of what it is that he does. Personally, I think that he's gonna have to be limited to the gun. His footwork is fine, but if he has to do anything that involves having to run some misdirection and then go back and try to find a receiver as slow as he is, it's just not gonna. The timing is gonna be off. That being said, the fact that he knows the score, he's cool with it. He's willing to come in and do the work. Continues to be the type of player, type of man, like you said, the team first, looking to go in and do it the old fashioned way. It's nothing but respect that you got to give them. I respect it. That's how you have to approach the situation. But the beauty of it is that the play that having gone out there and gotten to put a half a season, a little bit more, half the season on tape, he earned an opportunity to come back and compete for that job. And that can't be understated by AP. That can't be understated by him. is that, or anybody who wanted to rock with him, whether that would be the answer that everybody was looking for or not. He was solid enough to come back and earn the opportunity to win the job again.
Yeah. No, you make good points. And I like what you said about how Aiden O'Connell is really every step of his career from high school, college, Purdue, even, and then rookie year with the Raiders. It was like that. And that's not just been his mindset, but that's been his reality that he's lived. And, he's been a pro's pro about it the whole way. And quite frankly, he's rose above the entire way in every step of his career. And he's earned the starting job. Will he do it with the Raiders next year? Not so sure about that, but just you love the mindset regardless and the experience he has with this type of situation.
So mentally, I could say that he could get there, and if you got an offensive coordinator in here that would run a niche offense to where you maximize, and I mean to the extreme, the potential that you can get out of him, and I think that his greatest attribute isn't going to be physical; it's going to be consistency. If he can be consistent and start putting some points up, and be consistent in doing that, then he's really going to put a lot of pressure on the offense coordinator or the team to start him. But in terms of physical, you can get better physically. There's any number, almost every single guy in this draft is more physically capable than Aiden
O'Connell. Yeah, I mean that's honestly putting it mildly, but no, absolutely, man. And I like this is another thing too, is the Raiders situation. Because they had Derek Carr under center for basically a decade. They haven't really felt the need to go out there and get a quarterback in the draft, and now they feel it, and there really couldn't be a better year. I mean, there's just so much talent. My favorite guy, I talked about this with you a little before the show, in terms of just value and what you have now, what he is, what he can be, all that put together is Michael Penix. And Michael Penix isn't even talked about as a top 5 pick. And personally, if I had a top 5 pick, I would gladly use it on him, but he's not even talked about as a top 5 pick. And it just goes to show how good this quarterback class is, that it's like, okay, Michael Penix is there. Who really gives a fuck? And it's just the perfect year to, even if you and I are not high on JJ McCarthy by any means, but if JJ McCarthy came to the Raiders, you have to imagine he'd outdo Aiden O'Connell for all intents and purposes. They're the same type of guy in terms of mental preparation and how they prepare for the game. They're both very, very smart quarterbacks, and they're very great at reading defenses, all that sort of thing, doing what the coach wants. But even JJ McCarthy is better raw talent, and JJ McCarthy is definitely not a top 5, top 10 guy in the draft. So it really just goes to show.
Yeah, I guess you could say his running game, his running ability. I'd take Aiden O'Connell's arm and recognition over JJ McCarthy's right now, and that's actually saying something. Well, no, yeah, that's saying something.
The thing with JJ McCarthy is he's so accurate over the middle, and by over the middle I don't necessarily mean between the lines, but just whoever, because he can bootleg. He's very quick and he can escape the pocket. Very good legs, very shifty. Just he has to get the guy he's throwing to directly in front of him, whether he moves or he stays in the pocket. But when he does that, he's almost automatic, and that's good. And that's how the coaches want the throws to be anyway. They never want you to just throw across your body. Of course, there's going to be times where you kind of have to, not necessarily across the body, but, to outside of the field. The guy's not always going to be in front of you. That's ridiculous. It's like a fairy tale to even say that. But that's what the coach ideally wants. That's what he's going to try to draw up almost every time, and a guy like JJ, and I bring up JJ not because I think he's great. I bring up JJ for the exact opposite reasons. That a guy like JJ is not being talked about because he's not that guy, and he would be an upgrade for the Raiders. And it's really such an ideal situation for all these reasons that the quarterback class is that deep.
I'm trying to picture JJ as an upgrade to Aiden O'Connell, and I may need to watch some more tape, but it seems to me like that's a tougher sale than what you're making it out to be, at least for me anyway. But again, my opinion of JJ McCarthy is not that much. But I will say that all of the mentals that you mentioned and whatnot. Now, the thing that concerns me is how much he's doing now just to be able to get the ability that he has. You're talking about the visualization therapies, the meditations, the all of the extra things that he does to prepare himself to play for that he prepared himself to play for college at Michigan with nearly every advantage known to mankind on the football field. I'm curious that how much more room does he potentially have to grow in the pros because like you said, some basic aspects of the job are what will be fatal flaws to his game. And if thrown across the middle or directly in front of him is all that he's going to be able to do at this level, I pray for his wide receivers or whoever's catching the ball.
Well, again, I'm definitely not trying to sell anybody on JJ McCarthy. I'm a big Michigan fan, and I'm not really a big JJ McCarthy fan. JJ McCarthy's probably like my QB5, maybe QB6 in this draft, but that's my entire point. Is that JJ McCarthy, in my opinion, would be an upgrade, and he's QB5 or 6. I think JJ McCarthy does certainly come with his strengths. His
You got
biggest
to
weakness,
Jordan Travis.
yeah, Jordan Travis is top 3, but no, sorry, not top 3, not top 3.
Healthy Jordan Travis might be up there pretty high. I would still probably have him behind Penix.
Man, maybe 5. I
Yeah.
like I like him more than McCarthy.
What about Bo Picks?
I like him less than McCarthy.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I keep hearing this guy's name, and people keep trying to sell me on Bo Picks, and everything about how his career played out that it is not trending in the direction you wanted to trend in. And you can point to the stats to me all you want to, but you're talking about a guy who didn't win the conference ever, and he's been in college for 6 years now. Went from the SEC to the Pac-12. Didn't win the Pac-12 championship in the 2 years he's been out here. 70% of his passes are within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage or behind it. Uh, and every time, and then when he did the few times that he was able to go deep, it was because of play design and Dan Lanning, Oregon version of offense that is a great college system that doesn't work in the pros.
Yeah, I'm not high on Bo Nix at all. I'm glad we see eye to eye on that. We actually see eye to eye on JJ McCarthy too. Mostly, you're just a little lower on him than me. The one thing I was gonna say about JJ McCarthy is, funny enough, his one weakness is Aiden O'Connell's absolute strength. I mean, this is Aiden O'Connell's best quality for sure. Is throws outside the numbers. Those are Aiden O'Connell's even looked really good at that in the NFL. Best passes have been like that in the NFL. And JJ McCarthy, him throwing outside the numbers in college football, never mind the NFL, because obviously he isn't there yet, is like, oh my God, like what was that, man? Like, come on. But I don't know, man.
Good old stop and turn around passes where both the DB and the wide receiver, even the coach, everybody on the sideline just stop and turn. Like, who the hell is who's over there? Like, who's he throwing to?
Yeah, so that's definitely something for sure.
Where the DB starts talking trash to the receiver, talking about it's going to be a long day for you, but I ain't even got to cover you. This man is throwing the ball into the third row. Woo-hoo! It's about to be bad for you. It's going to be a long day. You hearing me run my mouth.
Oh, man. But yeah, man, this quarterback class is really good. And I'm really not that. I think you might be a little higher on Aiden O'Connell than me. For me, it's what you see is what you get. I don't really see the potential. Now, I hate to say that because he's a great kid, and
switch it up to you like this. So you take everything that you've seen about Aiden O'Connell right now. You give him a four receiver spread type offense with potentially a tight end or a running back in the backfield. You get an extra speed receiver out there, and instead of having everybody run those curl routes and those routes that stop right inside a certain amount of time, you give him either a true spread, or you give him a vertical West Coast offense, and see if he can't start make going through progressions and hitting reads in space, hitting routes in space, where you can do something with the ball instead of running that offensive system based off of 800 million checks and potential variances at the line of scrimmage, or throughout the course of the play, because there were so many option routes. Perhaps that was part of the problem. Instead of running an option route, you should find a play that works against the defense being called.
All right, so what you just said, I think Aiden O'Connell can do fine in, but I'm going to also follow that up by saying this. I think that is the perfect situation for mostly any quarterback in the NFL. In fact, you're almost giving up on the run and you're just saying, like, hey, we have all this passing out here. We're going to pass the ball. And everything's set up for passes, everything is set up ideal. And my point is, if you're in the NFL and you're a quarterback, you should be able to not thrive with that type of offense and that setup for you, but you should be able to be fine. You should be able to be viable with that. And quite frankly, if Aiden O'Connell couldn't be viable with that, I'd be like, why is this guy an NFL quarterback? So that doesn't really mean anything to me.
Fair point, but I was but the point that I was making was this: you can change the offense, and you can maximize his skill set in order to place you in positions for him to be of more effectiveness than what he was. Now, that being said, I absolutely stand on the business of trading up and doing whatever it is that you have to do to get a quarterback. Now, a lot of these people, you're going to continue to hear about the top three. I think your most important quarterback is probably going to be Hoosier fourth.
Oh, no, I totally agree with that. I totally agree with that. And it's going to be the pick. And I'm not saying Raiders are going to eye this pick, but once the top three quarterbacks go off the board, whoever they are, whatever order they go in, and whenever they get chosen, it doesn't matter what picks they get chosen with. But whenever those three are off the board, the next pick that's available is going to be worth, I think it's going to be worth a pretty penny. It's going to be a nice little bid war, because then whoever is your fourth best quarterback, I got to assume that whoever you view as your fourth best quarterback, once the top three are off the board, pretty universally agreed upon, it's going to be the quarterback that you, as the general manager, think is notably higher than the others. And I'm sure there's going to be diverse opinions on that. And that's what's going to make that pick worth. Obviously, it's not going to be worth more than the preceding picks, but it's going to be worth a lot. And it's probably going to be in high demand.
So here's what you're looking at. You're looking at, obviously, the Bears at 1, Washington at 2, New England at 3, Arizona at 4. My initial target was always Arizona, because I figured that in terms of what the Bears need, because the Bears are the ultimate wild card at 1. I still don't believe that they're going to draft a quarterback. I think that I believe that that's the wrong move. And I feel like if they were to draft, what they need more than anything is either Joe Alt or Marvin Harrison Jr. Those are two absolute home run. We need picks. We need this guy for the team in terms of fit more, because whether they bring in a different quarterback or not, you either need somebody to protect him, which they weren't doing for Justin, or you need somebody better for him to throw to, which is going to be the same issue for Caleb or whoever it is that they choose to pick at 1. We go into that issue, then we go into that thing that I happen to say, the conundrum that Washington faces, and if it is Ben Johnson, then chances are he might surprise you with a quarterback and go Drake May at that point.
Yeah,
Who knows?
Which will
Who
be
knows?
interesting. And
Yeah.
you have to assume New England goes quarterback at 3.
Ah, you know, you would naturally assume that, but I also know that it's a defensive coach, and a defensive coach is going to do what is so he's going to do what comes natural to him.
Yeah, that's a fair point. That's a fair point.
First time head coach is going to get him the best defender that he can find in the draft, because the defense is already leaps and bounds better than the offense. So if you want to have some hope, you better start. You're gonna have to start shutting them down, and you may not get yourself a premium quarterback right off the rip. But I mean, if you've got the third pick in the second round, you can still get a quality QB a lot better than what you had.
Yeah, and you can always trade up if you're that high rather in the second round. You could always trade up to the 31st or 32nd pick in the first round, so that way you get that fifth year option, like the Ravens did when they got Lamar Jackson, last pick in the first round. So you could always do one of those too if you're New England.
No, for sure. And so then from that point, so Arizona's not picking a quarterback. So now you're potentially looking at only two quarterbacks that have been drafted, which would leave you with the Chargers, who are not taking a quarterback, the Giants, who are not taking a quarterback, Tennessee, who also is probably not taking a quarterback because they got Mayo Man over there.
Mm-hmm.
And so you could conceivably get up to 7 and still have your shot at two or three of your top 5 choices being whoever it was that wasn't Caleb or Jaden or May. And then you could still be looking at Penix, who I think is ultimately player for player probably the better fit, the best fit out of all the quarterbacks. In terms of pure game, pure scheme, he's probably the best fit for the roster that you have now.
Did you say Penix?
Yes.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on that. So yeah, absolutely.
And it'll probably it looks like they're gonna try to move heaven and earth to J5, but Penix is probably much more likely to be in a range that they can get a step up and make a move for. And a lot of people, and there were a lot of things wrong with the national championship game, and people are going to try to shit on him all they want to. But the reality of it is that his wide receivers did very little to help him throughout that game, and dropped a lot of balls that hit him in both hands. Didn't get off the jam hold. Press, you can call it whatever it is that you want to, and give him an opportunity to get rid of the ball, and the line was terrible.
Listen, being pro-ready doesn't have to mean all that much, because Aiden O'Connell was very pro-ready, and at the end of the day, we're sitting here talking about trying to replace him after a year of football, so it doesn't have to mean that much. But I think that Michael Penix is absolutely head and shoulders the most pro-ready quarterback in this draft, and that certainly includes Caleb Williams. I don't even think Caleb Williams is pro-ready for that matter at all. But again, pro-ready doesn't have to mean jack shit. So there's that. But it's not just that he's pro-ready. I mean, he has all the talent in the world, really. And he's I'm pretty sure he tore both ACLs. That's concerning, but at the same time, and the steps the league has taken to protect quarterbacks, it shouldn't be that concerning. And we've seen quarterbacks bounce back from crazy injuries. Drew Brees had a crazy injury that was thought to be career-ending. Peyton Manning had a crazy injury thought to be career-ending. And these are 2 top 5 quarterbacks of all time. Tom Brady didn't have an injury that was thought to be career-ending, but he did tear his ACL, and we obviously know he's the GOAT. So it doesn't concern me as much. Now, granted, in saying that bit about Tom Brady tearing his ACL, he wasn't mobile like Penix is, but still, it just doesn't concern me, because Penix doesn't have to be mobile, because his best attribute is probably being a pocket passer. He just happens to be mobile, and that's just a bonus.
And I think, and that's why I said that in terms of in terms of players, you would be better with. He doesn't need to be more mobile than he is. It's not so much that I want a quarterback that's going to be running for 200 yards a game. I'll happily take it. Don't get me wrong, but that's not what I need him to do. What I've seen him do in terms of ball placement, timing, and throwing that and slinging that rock. That's what I need on this football team. I need a quarterback that's capable of making every single throw I need him to, whether it's on time, off time, in play, secondary play, making something happen on the move, pinpoint accuracy. when that ball's thrown, it's so butter. It's just right there that the receiver has no choice but to catch it and eat.
Yeah, man, absolutely. His throwing formation is very good, and people think that it looks a little goofy, but it doesn't fucking matter how it looks. It matters if it works or not, and it works. And that's all there is to it. And this quarterback talk specifically about
Real quick, you can talk because I look at quarterbacks throwing motions a lot, and he does have a funky little windup. My whole thing with your throwing motions is that if it's not like you said, if he's getting the ball there and with the level of zip and precision that he's getting the ball where it needs to be, perhaps it's not that it looks funky. It's just that it's literally him throwing with his opposite hand, so you're not used to seeing it that way.
no,
Because
for sure.
he's not lacking any velocity, and his accuracy is bar none.
No, there's definitely something about left-handed quarterbacks that they're all. When I see Michael Penix comparisons, pro comps, it's almost always left-handed quarterbacks or Philip Rivers. But the Philip Rivers one is even more lazy because that's really just judging. The Philip Rivers comp is literally just judging comparing rather their throwing forms to each other, and it's not even comparing their skill sets or how the zip on the ball or how far they get it, the accuracy. It's literally just the throwing forms that they're comparing when they say Philip Rivers. It's the laziest comparison I've ever heard, really. But if not Philip Rivers, it's a left-handed quarterback solely because it seems unorthodox because they're a left-handed quarterback, and that's all the Michael Penix pro comps are really just that. There's no pro comps about Michael Penix that are really comparing his actual talent or his actual skill set to other pros. I haven't seen one. It's always just the throwing form. But I was gonna say all of this is very relevant to the podcast episode being the Tommy T and AP because if there's a GM that's going to that, because we all know that quarterback is the Raiders' big thing right now, because quarterback is the most important position in the league, and on top of that, quarterback probably is the one that they should, even if it wasn't the most important position in the league, probably is the one that they need to upgrade the most out of every position. So if there's one, if there's a GM who will just take that and be like, all right, well, I have the balls to trade up because I know that's what we need to do. It's Tommy T. So this is all very relevant because Tommy T is not going to be like, well, I don't really want to trade up. I don't want to give up assets. Tommy T doesn't give a fuck about that. So this is very relevant.
No, for sure. And it's all things that are going to take some time to play out. It's not going to happen overnight. Like I said, the off season, we still haven't fully gotten into the off season because there's still football being played. And there's a lot of variables. There's a lot of things to happen. Tommy T has got to come in and do his thing. Now, you want to know what we haven't even really begun to talk about Tommy T and the relationship that he has with AP. And you, they couldn't be more polar opposites. But this is one of those things that it's so crazy that I actually think that it's going to work because you look at the way the two of them came in, the way they met, because you can see it on the team website. It said well, Tommy T comes in, hey, how you doing? Hey, you gotta be here, ready to get to work. And you hear AP come, Tommy, and he just looks so nervous. And then you get to the press conference, and Paul sets him up and says, "So did you ask him about what happened with the 63?" And you see it. The smile is all across AP's face. The lights up. He said, "Oh, you bet I did." It was the first thing I said to him when he got here. I was trying to score 71. That's cap. He wasn't trying to score 71. He stopped throwing the ball at 63 with about 14 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Ask me how I know because I was rooting for 8.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. And no, like you said, they couldn't be further apart, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to work good together or they don't think very highly of each other because, Tommy T was asked in the interview process who he would hire as a head coach or who he thinks should be the next Raiders head coach. He said Antonio Pierce, so he's with it.
So, and there's a word that seems to be synonymous with Antonio Pierce, and it's a word that you've heard many times, and it's probably not one that you're thinking that I'm going to come with, but I'm going to drop it on you. Unanimous. It was Mark Davis told reporters amongst the 7 general manager candidates, he asked them all who he should be hiring to be the coach of the Raiders. They unanimously selected Antonio Pierce. The players have unanimously selected him to be the interim coach as soon as Josh McDaniels got fired. So the coaching staff unanimously selected him to be the acting head coach.
Yeah,
The,
I'm sorry.
you couldn't find anybody in the media, anybody who knows football, that would tell you that Antonio Pierce is not the guy for the Raiders. Hall of Famers, talk show host, hell, even Colin Cowherd would tell you that was the guy, that was the coach of the Raiders. Everybody, he continues to have unanimous support everywhere he goes from everybody who sees him.
Yeah, and I think it's very important to stress that this isn't just Raiders coaches or Raiders players or people in the organization saying this. This is all across the league. This is GM candidates who came in and interviewed that were with other teams that know what's going on with the Raiders, and they're looking from the outside. It's not just people on the inside. Obviously, the inside means the most, but it's even more than that. It's people on the outside that are like, hey, like if I'm GM here, Antonio Pierce is the guy that I think should be the guy. Like, period.
Across the board, there is it's insane. It's like Piercemania. It's crazy. There's when I try to put it into words, I can't really encompass the emotion in the way that it's just sweeping. Like this man is the most Raider thing I've seen in my life in terms of a Raider since now. So not only is he such a Raider, when you look at what Mark is doing, Mark is walking with a little bit more swag, looks a little different, got a little bit more spice in his step, the way he's talking, the way he got himself a haircut, all types of different stuff. He got on some slamming gear, you know. Everybody G'd up with some of the sickest Raider gear I've ever seen, or that I remember seeing.
Oh yeah, and I'll never forget when Mark Davis walked out on the field for the first time. I believe it was the first time with AP as the interim. Man, it was because that was after Josh McDaniels was fired. Oh my God, he had so much swagger.
Woo. Oh my God! I was like, look at Mark. Mark came out here big dick swinging. Look at it. I didn't think he had it in him. Yeah, yes, you is your daddy's boy.
No man, no doubt.
But it's caught fire with everyone. Like I said, the unanimous is what makes this so extreme. Now, for all of the crap that I've given people and all of the back and forth and friendly bantering with some and just flat out getting on somebody else's nerves because I had a different opinion and I can do that. Antonio Pierce is such a unique is such an absolute unicorn. I thought we'll call it what it is. It is literally the only time you ever see one coach in one particular place be a more viable candidate than Jim Harbaugh. It makes more sense for Antonio Pierce to be there and Harbaugh to be with the Chargers than it would any place else, any other way around, except for him potentially taking Dabo's job in New York.
Yeah, and here's the thing, and I don't think Raider Nation really grasps this. When Mark Davis came into this process, he was pretty, I don't want to say adamant, but he was pretty set on the particular way of going about this, and that is he gets the GM and the GM gets the coach. However, what happened was not only was AP hired first, AP was hired an entire week before GM was announced, and it wasn't even the GM everybody assumed would be the GM. So it's not just like, well, they already had the GM figured out, and they were just bullshitting with the head coach and announced him first. No, that's not what happened at all, because everybody was wrong about that. But it just goes to show that Mark Davis had a plan, or what he wanted to be the plan, and he said, well, everybody likes AP, and I mean, no matter how we slice this, I guess he's going to be the head coach, so why not, as we figure everything else out. And I don't think Raider Nation really gets that Antonio Pierce is that. He had all that support, he had all that, um just everybody backing him, and everybody saying, this is the guy, not just media, not just Raider Nation on Twitter, not just the players, not just the coaches on the team, but players and, well, not players, but the coaches and general manager all across the league, man, all across the league. They all came in and said Antonio Pierce, like, no matter what we do, we want Antonio Pierce as the guy. And Mark Davis said, well, I was going GM first, but doesn't matter who I pick as a GM. You guys all want Antonio Pierce, so I'm gonna just go head coach first.
And J.J. Watt, guys who are no longer in the league. You could even count Howie Long was on Up and Adams, and he was talking to Kay, and he danced around it as gracefully as a Hall of Famer could, or somebody who's got some type of skin in the game would dance around it. But it was obvious. Like, the man left it. You would have thought he had scored the winning touchdown the way he left the field. People are screaming his name while he's running off the field. This is the coach. The only thing that probably would have screwed this up is that that Al would have got jealous of him.
It's probably true.
That he could give Al all the credit. I mean, it would kind of it. I'm not even gonna go there because we're way too early for me to make that comparison. But he has the engaging personality that Madden.
No, man, he really does, and that's ultimately why he not it's not the only reason why he had all the support, but this is the reason, because he's so engaging, and he just, everybody gravitates towards him, that he was able to have all this support so quickly, because it is so quickly. It's only been a few months since he stepped in and was head coach for the first time.
It's few people have the ability to be an in-your-face person, but in a good way, in a positive way, in an uplifting way, in a straight shooting kind of way. Now, often when you say somebody's an in-your-face kind of guy, that's a bad thing. But the energy is infectious. You get, I mean, if you've got red blood and you get up in the morning and you want to be happy, the energy is infectious. And I think Levi had said he was running out of brick walls to run through for this man. But it's like, listen, if I had about 2 hours left in my body to strap up, I'd give it to him.
No, for real, man, for real. Very, very. I like what you said, because it's very true. Only a few people in the world have that ability to be in your face. I'm loud and I'm here, and it's like, you're not just like, all right, I know you're here, go away, bro. It's like, I know you're here, so give me what you got, man. Give me what you got. I want to hear it. Like, that's Antonio Pierce.
Yeah. Nobody wanted to scream Raiders with him when he was on the way out. But so on the way back in, he got the whole room full of people to let it fly. And I mean, that's the type of engagement that you get. And you're talking about people who've just been there for the first time, people who've been there for a while. That type of stuff. You like the older heads will say, you've seen it before. Guys come in and it sounds good, it looks good, it's all promising, yada yada yada. But is it going to win? But I believe that with the additions that you already see to the defensive staff, and we'll talk about this before we get out of here. Gerald Alexander at safety as a safety coach is huge, phenomenal. Now you can look back at what he's done with Javon Holland and the Miami secondary, and that he's done very good things over there with that. But I know Gerald Alexander back to when he was coaching. DBs at Cal, a particular unit called the hashtag Takers, which he had, I believe, 5 guys drafted from. Yes, 5 guys drafted from. Most of Cameron Bynum, the safety for the Minnesota Vikings. That was probably his best prospect. And then there's Ashton Davis, the safety for the Jets. Then you also have Jalen Hawkins, who got drafted by the Falcons, but I believe when I last checked, he was playing with the Chargers. And then Daniel Scott, who was drafted and tore up his knee. Otherwise, he would have got a chance to play. But he was a guy that I was very high on in this year's draft and hoped that the Raiders would pick up. And he teaches guys to be smart. They study film. They understand the defense. They know their responsibilities. They make their checks. They communicate, and they work together, and they do everything that they're supposed to do cohesively as a unit. They tackle. They get to the ball. And when they get their hands on it, when they're able, they make a play. It's the discipline and the way and some of the things that Patrick Graham likes to do in terms of disguise and wrote, kind of like what I saw Spagnuolo do with the Chiefs, and bring a safety down into what's usually not a rover, but a robber position zone, and then rotate it back out into 2 deep and into cover 2, and just confuse the shit out of the quarterback. There's a lot of disguise and things that can be done to add to what the defense is capable of if your safeties are in finer tune. And now you have a guy who can really coach up Paul Amal, and we can take full advantage of his skill set in terms of size, speed, and strength to match up with tight ends or match up with whomever or cover specific points so that you can use them as a defensive chess piece. And then continue on with Trayvon Moor's development and evolution, and continue to improve Marcus Epps as well. And then you have Ricky Manning Jr., who's going to be the new corner coach. And you've had great play from Jack Jones. You've had good play from Amik Robertson. You've had good to great play from Nate Hobbs, and not as great as his rookie year, but you've definitely continued to get solid from Nate Hobbs. And then you've got some other guys on your roster he can work, if he can work with Jacorian Bennett and get Jacorian Bennett to up to where he needs to be, along with him getting bigger. Because Ricky Manning Jr. had played with Chicago way back in the day. I think back with Urlacher and on a playoff team. And he was an undersized corner, a 5'9" corner, but he's solid. Much bigger than any of these other guys are at 5'9".
Yeah, well, I hope Jacorian Bennett can get it together, because he was a guy I was very high on in the draft. And the reason is because, raw talent doesn't really have to mean anything, because at the end of the day, it's potential, and potential is really just the word if you don't live up to it. But his potential, his raw talent is absolutely fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. And he has all the skills that you can want, and he just needs to put it together. But, there's no real reason why he can't, and you just hope that he can. And as far as the defense as a whole, safeties especially, I don't think people realize how good this safety group really is. This safety group is so fantastic, so fantastic. Trayvon Moehrig is always really good in coverage. This year, he took such a big leap forward at locating the ball carrier, pursuit, locating the ball carrier, and making one-on-one tackles. Those were 2 things he really wasn't the greatest at. And this year, he took very, very strong leaps forward. There were many one-on-one situations where he came across just, meeting the ball carrier one-on-one, and he won those. And, he's not a hard-hitting safety, but who gives a shit about that as long as you're reliable? And he was very reliable this year in many of those situations. And he's still good in coverage. You look at Marcus Epps. Here's the big thing with Marcus Epps. Marcus Epps was a big reason for this safety turnaround, for really the defense turnaround. And not just because of what he's done with the Raiders. Look at Philadelphia's secondary. And if you don't think Marcus Epps was a big contributor to that secondary last year, he played more snaps than any other Eagles player in the entire secondary. Marcus Epps did last year. And that's when their secondary was phenomenal. This year, that secondary was very exploitable. They just kept getting exploited. James Bradbury fell off a cliff. The other safeties weren't really that good. Darius Slay. But overall, the secondary was very beatable, and we know that because they just kept getting beat, especially at the end of the year. I mean, they lost, I believe, 6 out of their last 7 games, including the playoff game. They just kept losing. And that's Marcus Epps being taken away from there, who is, again, their number one player who played the most snaps in the secondary, coming to the Raiders. And the Raiders, uncoincidentally, got so much better and tighter as a unit. And a big thing about AP being the coach, and we could talk about all these things that AP is, and he brings this and he brings that. Well, one thing that AP brings, and it's not because AP's AP, it's because AP's already been here, is continuity. And that is what the Raiders have needed so badly, because that means we are not going to see this defensive coordinator, who I've already said many times and is very true, is the best Raiders defensive coordinator of my lifetime since I started watching football and following football anyway, and is really not even close. So Patrick Graham gets to stay, and all these defensive pieces get to stay. And that's so big, because usually at this time, what happens is if you hire another Josh McDaniels, like for example Jim Harbaugh, what happens is you don't know which one of these guys are staying. You don't know who's leaving, and we can't just say, oh well, these guys are good players, there's no reason for them to go, because that's not how real life works. Football world anyway. What happens in the football world is it doesn't matter if guys are better or not than other players, more talented, because that means nothing. That means really nothing to a coach. What matters is how they fit your system and how they don't fit your system. And that's what you're looking for. You're not looking for a more talented guy. You're looking for a guy who fits your system better as a coach. And because Patrick Graham is being retained, that means we can assume all of the pieces that performed very well last year, which is everybody on the defense, that they're all pretty much going to be retained and not going to be moved. And that's all because AP is still there. And that is so big to the Raiders.
It's huge. I'm so happy that the defensive staff, not only is it going to stay the same for the most part, it got better. And it's gonna continue to get better. Rob Leonard is an excellent defensive line coach. I don't expect him to go anywhere. In terms of linebacker, I know that Telesco is going to get him a top tier quality linebacker. And that's not to say that they haven't already got a set of linebackers that had a great season. Because Diablo and Spill are. I got to give them a golf clap.
And look, here's the thing too. AP's not going to be their linebacker coach anymore, but we have to say that when you're taught something, that's it. You're taught it. So what I'm trying to say is AP taught them. You don't just automatically be untaught everything that you've learned because now AP isn't their coach anymore. No, that's it. They learned all this stuff already, and you have to assume that they're not going to take steps backwards because they were taught it and now they know it, and that's all there is to it. They're not just going to unlearn it.
And that's not even fair to AP, because the reality of the situation, yes, there may be another person in that position because obviously AP has more things to do, but as a former linebacker who's played at the highest levels, uh, and a coach nonetheless, defensive as well as linebacking coach, if he sees something, he's gonna say something, because that's who he is. That's what successful coaches do. And so he's not going to stop coaching linebackers either. Like you said, he's not going to be formulating the game plans. He's going to leave that to his coordinators. He's just going to be facilitating and overseeing and making sure that he continues to do what it is that he does, and encourages the other team. Now, as you were talking about Patrick Graham, I thought, what if Patrick Graham got an assistant head coaching gig?
With the Raiders?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, I mean, that'd be fine and dandy, but if it was for another team, I'd be heartbroken. But
well, he couldn't be an assistant head coach for another team. They blocked it. That'd be but as one of the first people that AP greeted when he came in and sat down was Champ Kelly, Patrick Graham, and Champ Kelly, in that order, I believe too.
Yeah, that's good. That's very good. And I like that even Champ Kelly, it seems that you never know if another team is going to throw the moon and stars at him because it did seem like he was the Panthers' number one choice for GM, but it does seem like he's going to cuz he is under contract with the Raiders still for assistant GM. So it does seem like that's going to continue to carry out.
So also let's just get the elephant is in the room. We'll just go ahead and acknowledge it. The fact that Champ Kelly has been paraded as as what should have looked like he was going to be the de facto GM all the way through, and get promoted to the top job, and he ended up not getting promoted, was probably going to turn him off from a lot of other teams because this was supposed to be his situation, like the perfect circumstance to move forward, and somehow that fell through. And now there's some speculations, and JT the Brick has come out and said that there needed to be a plan on how to move up in the draft to get the quarterback that you desire, and one candidate had it and one candidate did not.
Yeah. No, you're right, but I think I also think that Tom Telesco, fans always see things different for the most part, and that's because fans don't really think, and that's cruel, but it's very blunt and harsh, and truth hurts sometimes. And they see that the Chargers underperform year after year, and it's just like, well, this guy's the general manager of them. Why is he good? Why do teams want him? But the reality is, he's very well respected across the league. And what I'm trying to say is, if Tom Telesco beats you out for a GM job, I don't know how much of a demerit that is because it's like he's a very qualified GM and he's frankly pretty good at what he does.
No, and that's it's mind-boggling to me for all of the players that Raider Nation has said they wish that had gotten drafted instead of the guys that we picked up. A good healthy majority of them are on the Chargers roster. And Jim Harbaugh is not getting well. He's going to end up getting rid of a lot of higher paid talent than what he has, but a lot of those guys are on the downside of careers and spend a healthy amount of time on the training table and less on the field. So it may be fat trimming time for some of those guys, but in terms of the amount of talent that has flown through that team, as we stated earlier, the Chargers have been one of the most underperforming teams ever in the last 10 since he got there, pretty much.
Yeah, and listen, I like what you just said because we need to talk about this. We haven't talked about this yet. And what you just said was you brought up something that's not directly what I want to talk about, but you said Chargers are going to look to move some of that higher paid talent that they have. That's big because a big gripe with Raider Nation with Tom Telesco is they're like, well, he gave all these players contracts, and we talked about this a little before the show, and I hear people say in Raider Nation, well, he gave Joey Bosa this contract, and we know he doesn't. Tom Telesco doesn't directly take care of the exact contracts that are given out, but he obviously is the guy that's like, well, we should try to extend this guy, we should try to extend that guy, and I see Raider Nation talk about, well, he gave Joey. They were quick to re-sign Joey Bosa, quick to re-sign Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, and it's like these are cornerstone players. Like I hope to God if these guys were on the Raiders, that whoever our general manager is would try to re-sign these guys because these are important players to a team. How you view this as a demerit, I don't understand.
People find demerits in a lot of very interesting ways because I just don't understand. If you go back and you look at his track record through the first two rounds, oh, but he sucks in the middle round. Your rate of hitting on your first round draft picks is at about 80%, literally 80%. If we hit on 80% of our draft picks, our first round draft picks, do you know how entirely different our football team and fortune would be looking?
I mean, we'd probably be looking like the Chargers, which is a stacked roster every single year.
With winners, because for all the times that we said we didn't, you'd have the greatest lineman ever. Because how many times did the Raiders pick a lineman? They picked more linemen in the first round than they have quarterbacks. Make that make sense.
they've missed on a lot of offensive linemen, and the Chargers have picked in the last I don't know, maybe 5 years. I believe they picked 2 offensive linemen in the first round, and they've both been fantastic. I mean, they've both been
Both
fantastic.
of them. Yeah, Zion Johnson was the guy that me and Michael Jones were very high.
Yeah, and he was great. He was
He
very
was
good.
past it.
And so it's like they've even that position that the Raiders have looked. And that's honestly that's another position that the Raiders could use, probably the second most. It has to be the second most. It's really not even a question. But after quarterback, so even if for whatever reason they didn't pick quarterback, which I don't think they're going to pass on, it sounds like they're very focused on getting a quarterback. But what I'm trying to say is, even if they don't, like Tom Telesco has proven that the position that the Chargers need the second most. I mean, he's arguably proven the position that they need that the Raiders need the first most, being quarterback, that he can go out and get. Because everybody doubted Justin Herbert when Justin Herbert was picked. It was like, well, that was an odd pick, and now everybody's just like, wow, this guy is a top 5 quarterback. I don't agree with that, but that's neither here nor there. Is what I'm trying to say. Um, Basically, what I'm trying to say is the 2 units that the Raiders need the most. Tom Telesco has proven that he can go out and he can absolutely kill that.
Yeah, he can fill every hole in this roster. And now the most interesting thing about it is the fact that most of the roster is going to be experiencing the turnover from the previous regime. They're coming into third and fourth years, and you're going to have to start making decisions on who to bring back and who to let go, because you can't pay everyone, and so you get a chance to see if they're going to pull it off this year or show you who's worth returning and who's not, and you're going to start seeing some turnover with better talent. And so if he doesn't do anything else than what he's already done, without John Spanos hanging over his shoulder and telling him what he can and can't do, and he just has an opportunity to go out and fill these positions. And AP is going to tell if you're working with AP, because for I'm not gonna get into the whole power struggle or how things are set up, but that AP has a very domineering personality versus Tommy T.
Yeah, and another thing is, I mean, I'm sure Tom Telesco is going to have all the power in the world that he wants, but when Mark Davis hires somebody, and it's been like this with every single regime he's ever hired. When he hired the Reggie McKenzie regime, that was Reggie McKenzie who had the power. When he did the John Gruden thing, that was John Gruden who had all the say. When it was Josh McDaniels, that was Josh McDaniels. And, they say Dave Ziegler could have done whatever he wanted. But at the end of the day, that was really Josh McDaniels' vision. And everybody knew that. Dave Ziegler knew that. And this is Antonio Pierce. Antonio Pierce is the guy who is the real leader of the ship here. And again, that's not to say that Tom Telesco doesn't have all the power in the world to do whatever he wants, but this is Antonio Pierce's vision.
On paper. But again, I'm not going to go down there, because everybody that Pierce works with, he works with, and they're going to work together, and they're going to do it together, because you need a team to do it here, and you can't do everything by yourself. But again, that's why he got the job, because he's not trying to do everything. He's facilitating and allowing people to do what it is that they do best, and adding to it and giving his perspective here and there, and learning and educating himself on why it is that things are happening, and surrounding himself with people who know and who've done it before, who can also tell him what it is that he's missing from what's going on. So the people that he has around him, brick by brick, the organizational structure is much better. And if they succeed in working together the way that they've been trying to work together, then it's going to translate to the field quickly. But the funny thing about it was, that's where it started. So it started on the field, and has taken itself to the off season, and hit the coaching staff and the organization, and blown up from there to turn it back around, to focus back on the field. And so this whole thing is feeding itself in a way that you could only hope for when you come up with a rebuilding strategy. This is what you're looking for. This in a nutshell, when all is said and done, and I don't know if they'll win or if they're not. He didn't promise anything, and neither will I. But looking at the way that this is growing, it's going to grow into something special because it's starting or in such a way that it's self-sustaining. And when it's self-sustaining and continuing to build off being self-sustained, eventually when it gets outer sources of fuel and fire, it's going to explode.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I love what you said about how AP is not looking to come in and be that guy who has all the power. Because I wasn't really suggesting that, but what you said is absolutely true. That really is why he has all the support, because he's not that kind of guy. But Tom Telesco, um, people naturally have their own vision. Like me and you, we agree on a lot, and you and I with the show, for example, we work together. But there are things that you and I disagree on, and we have our own vision, and it doesn't mean that we're not working together. But that's just, if everybody saw things the same, nobody would be an individual. That's what it's down to. And what I'm trying to say is, I'm sure Tom Telesco views things a little different than AP, but at the end of the day, this is not the Tom Telesco show. This is the AP show. And that's not to say that if they have a disagreement, AP's not going to be like, well, you know what? I like your ideas on it. Let's roll with your idea. But it's just to say that it's going to go through AP. And if AP wants to be that guy, who he's not this guy at all, but if he wants to be the guy that says, "Look, bro, it's my way, and that's all we're doing," then that's what's going to happen with the Raiders. This is really the AP show.
You get one of those. Everybody's not meant to be a Raider. That was pretty. That was pretty smooth. That was pretty smooth. But again, when you look at what's happened in terms of the culture, if he's saying it, then that's genuinely what it is.
No,
Because again, we bring up that word unanimous. Well, the one person that had a problem is no longer here. If you didn't buy in, hey, this is not the place for you. And if you're not bought in, guess what? It's not the place for it.
no, man, I totally agree. I totally agree. Yeah, Antonio Pierce, and it's not just that the culture has changed, because we could talk about that, and that's obviously so important. That might be the most important thing, that the culture is changing, especially with the team that has not had that culture. They're starting to get it with John Gruden, but as I say almost every week when I bring up John Gruden, it seemed like things were starting to change, but they ultimately didn't because of the whole situation that happened. So that's just like really a what if. Oh, it's really basically a what if. But not only did AP change it, let's just say that John Gruden did in fact change everything for the Raiders. Let's just say that happened. That took 3.5 years. It took half a year for AP. I mean, there's levels to this shit.
No, for sure. There certainly is levels to this, but there's also hard experience that's got to be gained, and there's going to be some bumps for it. Continue to be bumps for AP along the way, and I definitely think that he has the metal to withstand them and continue to navigate and keep going. That he's built for it, but it's still going to happen. And everybody, the expectations that are around here are probably are going to be astronomical. Uh, I don't see with the full season to work with. I fully expect them to be in playoff contention, but that's not fair to ask, even though that's what we're all going to expect.
No, for sure, for sure. It's not fair to ask, because, like you said, like I said, half a season, and you can't really just be like, "Hey, man, we gave you half a season, and then this year, make the fucking playoffs." But I mean, for all intents and purposes, man, I mean, I expect it, and that's not to say that it should happen, like it's a given, or like if he doesn't make the playoffs, it's just a disappointment. But I mean, I really expect it.
Yeah, no, for sure, and it's going to be a lot of fun. No matter what, we're going to have. It's going to be an amazing ride, and I just can't wait to see where it goes. but it's also going to require patience because everybody's going to want everything to be done right away, and these guys got to have time to do their work so that they can make the best possible decisions.
Yeah, and I hope that Raider Nation can start to see it. I know a lot have, but a lot haven't. That continuity is so big because I keep talking about this almost every week, and I already talked about it this episode with the John Gruden thing. That is the best the Raiders have looked, or we're starting to look in. I mean, forever, and well, my entire football lifetime, and that took a few years to get going. Well, there was 2016, but that's like a one-off. That was just one and done type deal. But that took years to establish that and keep moving forward because they did move forward every year under Gruden, and it took years and years and years. And the only time Raider Nation, most of Raider Nation, besides people who've witnessed the glory days, the only time that they've seen that is when a guy has been here for multiple years, and when they've kept building under the same guy, that this and that, and that's what they're doing with AP. And I really hope that Raider Nation can see, for all those that wanted Jim Harbaugh and all those that wanted whoever they wanted, and you have every right to be disappointed that your guy, whoever you wanted for whatever reason, wasn't hired. I understand that, but I hope that Raider Nation can see that that's really the only way that teams form, that they just keep getting better and they just build these powerhouses because of continuity. You look at the 49ers, Kyle Shanahan, they're always in the NFC Championship. It seems they're already in it right now. It's because continuity. You look at the Ravens, they're always floating around. Continuity. You look at the Steelers. Steelers haven't done shit in the playoffs the last X amount of years, but Mike Tomlin has never had a losing record. Continuity. And New England Patriots, and up until the last 2 years with Mac Jones and everybody's been leaving. Continuity. Anywhere you look around the league, continuity. And I just hope that Raider Nation can finally see and accept that, and acknowledge that the Raiders are making steps towards that.
It'll come with time. They'll need to see more. They'll need to see more. There's no faith, and with good reason. They, quite frankly, the Raiders, the way that the product on the field has the product off the period hasn't really exactly been a good place of faith. But things are different. They're different, and I truly believe that they're going to get it right. It's right this time. Now there may be some there's going to be some ironing out in terms of personality and things behind the scenes as everybody's now coming together. But on the field, I believe that it's going to be right. It's going to look the way that it should, because you saw what happened in a very short amount of time, an insanely short amount of time. I want a historic amount of time, because I want you to understand the turnaround that you saw in terms of performance from 1 week to another was astounding.
No, certainly. I mean, we've already said this on past episodes, and I'm sure countless people have said this because it's true, that they didn't, with Josh McDaniels, they didn't score over, 20 all season, and then first game, 30?
30?
I mean, can you say?
So, there's a lot that can be said, and I'm not going to say that football is not that difficult, because it is. It's hard, but it doesn't have to be as so intricate that if one thing is even slightly off, it blows the whole play and you get nothing.
The Josh McDaniels approach.
Yeah. Like if you gotta scheme that hard to get a few inches of space, then chances are you probably should have been doing something different.
No, certainly, man, certainly.
But we've been going strong for almost an hour and 20 minutes now, so we thank you for tuning in to episode 5. AP and Tommy T together at last. Alex, take us out. Tell them what you got going on.
Raider Nation, we appreciate you guys. We very appreciative that every week it seems like we're getting better following, and we love that because Phil and I, we know what the fuck we're talking about, and we appreciate that you guys are recognizing that. And man, we're just so appreciative of you guys following the journey, and I hope you guys keep following.
Like and subscribe, tune in, catch the unfiltered truth as well. And look for me at RaiderRamble.com. I actually need to get to work to writing. It's been a while and a lot has happened. Thank you for tuning in. Episode 5, the AP Cast.